With no end in sight in the wake of the short-lived mutiny in Russia, U.S. support of Ukraine has been very expensive. Since the war began, the U.S. has spent nearly $80 billion helping Ukraine, with much more on the way. Some conservatives in Congress have questioned if this is the best use of your taxpayer dollars when there are so many pressing needs here at home. Joining us now is Representative Bob Good, Republican of Virginia. Congressman, welcome to the show. It's good to see you this evening. Okay, so you have argued that the Biden administration should do more to secure the southern border before throwing tons of money at Ukraine. But can't we and should we do both?
Well, the first priority, of course, needs to be the safety and security of our nation. That is the number one role and responsibility of the federal government. That includes, by the way, securing and ensuring our constitutional liberties and freedoms and our constitutional rights are intact, but also securing our border. And I argued on the House floor last week, as a matter of fact, that the president should be impeached because of the border invasion alone. He's not allowing it to happen. He's causing it to happen. And while more investigation is warranted for the other Biden crime allegations, there is certainly no additional investigation that's needed for the border. How can we allow that to continue for another year and a half? That said, as it applies to Ukraine, the numbers that I have is about $113 billion that's been given to Ukraine in aid from the United States. We have overwhelmingly been the largest provider of aid. And why are we providing more than Europe is? Europe is similar to the U.S. in population. It certainly is closer in proximity. This is a greater threat, what happens in Russia and Ukraine, to the European nations. Why are we providing such a disproportionate level of aid from the United States versus NATO at large, or Europe specifically? So, and what is the national security interest of the United States? What is the exit strategy? And what is the end game for us here? The last thing I'll just point out before I kick back to you is, how has the Biden crime family's business dealings in Ukraine impacted in the alleged $5 million bribery scandal for both Hunter Biden and Joe Biden? How's that impacted Ukraine policy?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, my question to you would be, do you think there could be more done diplomatically to help Ukraine win the war that isn't being done?
Well, I do think the United States ought to be advocating for a peace solution there. These are going to be border countries for the next, millennium, if you will. They've been border countries for a long time. And, there is going to be life after this conflict in some way. And that's why I think we need to be very careful and circumspect about the U.S. involvement or U.S. efforts to escalate the conflict. There are some on our side who almost seem like they want to escalate the conflict. There's some who seem like they want to have regime change in Russia. I don't think that is the role of the United States to do that. Again, we need to put our safety and security first, our national security interests first. And I don't think that we should be borrowing, mind you, we don't have the money, but borrowing to send money to Ukraine.
Do you think, I want to hit back to something you said earlier, do you think that Biden has been compromised in his ability to diplomatically negotiate because of these bribery schemes that you suggested earlier, these allegations that he was involved in these bribery schemes?
I think he's compromised because of his failures on the national stage. I mean, it was President Obama's Secretary of Defense who said that Biden has been wrong on every national security issue over the last how many decades. And he's failed with the withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was a national embarrassment. He's failed to confront China. You have to wonder also about the business dealings in China. The Biden family, we don't know what the Biden family business is. We don't know how they're making money off these international relations. We don't know, what goods and services they're providing to the folks in Romania, Russia, Ukraine, or China. But how about the fact that President Trump appropriately labeled China as an adversary, was the strongest president confronting China that we've ever had. And then Biden changes that designation to more of a competitive partnership. How is he compromised with China relations based on the money that his family has made off Chinese business relationships? And the fact that we won't confront them over the spy balloon, we won't confront them over the treatment of the Uyghurs, we won't confront them over how they manipulate their own currency or their surveillance of our country or their theft of intellectual property in our country. China doesn't fear the president. No one across on the national or world stage, I should say, seems to fear this president. But then in addition to that, you've got all these allegations, again, of the Biden crime dealings, his handling of classified documents as vice president, as senator, when he had no ability to declassify materials, and frankly, as a senator, had no ability to accidentally remove classified documents from the skiff that we have to go into when we look at classified documents as members of Congress.
Before I let you go, Congressman, you mentioned impeachment of President Biden. There seems to be different efforts coming from House Republicans right now. Are you guys going to try to have one unified effort, or will we continue to see multiple efforts by different representatives?
Well, we will see. It certainly is. You have, when you have critical mass and we're united together, you have a stronger opportunity for that to move forward. I think he deserves to be impeached based on depleting the strategic petroleum reserves for political reasons right before the election. He deserves to be impeached because he takes extra constitutional action. He says he doesn't have the authority for the eviction moratorium. He does it anyway. He says he doesn't have the authority for the student loan transfer scheme. He does it anyway. And some people believe he deserves to be impeached for what he did with Afghanistan. I think the primary reason he needs to be impeached is because of the border crisis. We've had 7 million illegals enter the country under his watch, 1.5 million criminal gotaways with terrorist ties, trafficking drugs, sex trafficking, who knows what into our country. How do we let that go on for another year and a half? I suspect, though, to your point, I suspect that as the Oversight Committee continues its investigations, as we continue to look into these seemingly credible whistleblower allegations, that you're going to have another reason that we're going to need for impeachment to be pursued. I think you're seeing the greatest political scandal in the history of the country if the allegations are true against this president.
All right. Well, we'll be watching. Congressman, good to see you this evening.
Thank you. Great to be with you, Lindsay.